They'll see you now. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Mritam Gamaya Avir Avir Maedhi Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Te Namam Pahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourself, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Today is what is probably the holiest day in the Christian tradition. Naturally, a larger celebration is usually held for Christmas Day, the celebration of the birth of Christ. But what makes Christianity is really the resurrection of Christ, which occurred or is traditionally thought to have occurred on a Sunday. And all of this is described in the New Testament of the Bible. But the celebration usually in the Christian churches, or at least in some of them, the time before that, the Easter Sunday, a few weeks before, everything is very dark and kept deliberately, very subdued. And then on Easter Sunday, it is supposed to manifest in a great sort of a festival of light, because that is the real message of Christianity, that Christ rose, that Christ conquered death, and in the same way we also can do that. And because of his having experienced all of that, we also are able to follow, to make our life blessed and successful, and to actually feel the reality of God, to experience the truth of God, to experience the salvation of God, to be able to enter the kingdom of heaven, if you use the phrasing of the Bible. Now, the interesting thing would be, is this a festival that is unique to Christianity, or is it something that is actually presented or represented in other religions also? And it is really the message of all religions. Now, it is tied to very historical event in the sense of Christianity, but that message is really the message of religion, that whatever we see around us, the conflicts and the resolutions and the happiness and the misery, the various other factors of human life, they are not meaningless, they are not random occurrences. Scientifically, one could say this is a random occurrence. It is difficult to maintain that there's a purpose to all of this, except the purpose might be development of the species, that as the species adapts to the conditions of the environment, it develops. But that is that is a very narrow tableau. It's a very narrow, very restricted view, because it just confines itself to the physical experience of life, physical and intellectual and emotional experiences of life. And the yearning in the hearts of human beings is for something more than that. And it is really not only in human beings. We can't exclude the animal kingdom from that. If you see how especially domesticated animals behave, the similar feelings and hopes and experiences can also be seen to a certain extent in them, and sometimes very definitely so. So this is really a universal message, and from wherever we are, from wherever we look at the universe, from whatever station and whatever physical envelope we have, the yearning is for something more, something deeper, something more significant. And so that is very much illustrated in the message of Easter, that it is possible to achieve a reality which is entirely magnificent, entirely beautiful, entirely glorious, and also unending. That there is a possibility, that is the message of Easter, there is a possibility of reaching beyond the limitations that are so apparent in human existence. And those things which are unfulfilled here, which are causes of distress here, there is a possibility of overcoming those limitations. And so this, in the Hindu tradition, this is mentioned in our basic scriptures, which are the Upanishads, the concluding portions of the ancient scriptures known as the Vedas. And there are many different places in which in those scriptures these things are mentioned. But one particular one that is always cited is from the Isha Upanishad. It is the first verse of the Isha Upanishad, which is one of the oldest parts of the Vedas. And so it has had a long tradition over, we do not know how many hundreds and thousands of years this tradition exists. Ishavasyam idam sarvam. That is how it starts. Isha is Lord. Isha means by means of the Lord, by means of that ruling supreme reality. Vasyam idam sarvam. Vasyam means it is to be covered, it is to be clothed, it is to be enveloped by. What is it that is to be enveloped? Sarvam, everything. Yat kincha jagatyam jagat. Everything that, whatever it is that moves in this world, is to be seen as permeated by God. So this is very much in line with the basic ideas that are stirred in the human heart at the thought of Easter, that the Lord is present in all these things. It isn't that we're here in this world on a lower level yearning for something higher, and that the chance of getting to something higher depends on so many factors that we may not have control over. No, the point is that the reality of that higher existence is present right now. And it is to be seen as being present right now. If we're convinced that God is nowhere to be seen in this universe, and that we have to, something extraordinary has to happen before we experience the reality of God. This is not the message. The message is that everything that is perceived is to be seen as enveloped by that reality, as permeating and permeated by that reality. Isha vasyam idam sarvam, yat kincha jagatyam jagat. Whatever, what kincha, whatever, jagatyam, in this world, jagat, whatever moves in this world. Whatever moves in this world is seen to be permeated by the Divine Spirit. We are to see God everywhere. And that is contrasting with the present situation in which we find ourselves, that we don't see God anywhere. So it seems like rather a very strange situation. We are asked to see God everywhere, and we actually see God nowhere. That seems to be our experience. But that is only because we are not really looking at it very intensely. Because the Upanishads, in all their variety, in various ways, explain that that reality is really present. That divine principle is really present. It isn't just this one Upanishad that maintains that the reality should be seen as pervading everything. It is something that we are to see as actually being so. But the Upanishads maintain that this is the truth. It is not only something that is to be seen or to be superimposed on what we, the limitations that we see around us. The infinite is supposed to be seen as somehow within this. The idea is that there really is nothing else. Whatever we perceive is really a perception of God. That is another way of phrasing that. So it isn't something that we need to achieve by doing something or becoming something else, or entering in some sort of a practice that is strange and because naturally certain practices have been developed to try to achieve this realization of God. And some of them, of course, yoga, different forms of yoga is exactly that. So we may say, oh, it is all right, it may work for some people, but it's an extremely difficult situation, and it's likely to be totally beyond our powers to be able to achieve the reality in this way. But that is only, again, at the surface of things. What the scriptures tell us is that God alone exists, and what we're seeing is actually that divine reality, and we're interpreting it in a limited way. We're seeing the unlimited and we're interpreting it in a limited way. And so the remedy of that is to change our point of view, to change how we perceive things. Now, this other Upanishads also approach this situation in different ways. One of the methods that is advocated is try to see that what is meant by all this. In other words, all this is to be covered by the Lord. All this is to be seen as permeated by the divine reality. What is this? What is this? What does this consist of? What does our experience consist of? So we have an analysis of the states of the experience. We have the waking state, the dream state, and we think that that's all there is, but actually there's another state. That is the deep sleep state, which gives us a clue as to how to proceed. The deep sleep state is something that we yearn for, and if we don't get deep sleep for a certain period of time, we feel extremely deprived and we feel extremely restless. But what is it that we get in deep sleep? What is the reality that we experience in deep sleep that makes it so precious to us? It is not something that we see or we experience. It is the very fact that we don't experience anything on the surface. So the message is not that there's anything that's so very profound about deep sleep, because when we wake up from deep sleep, we feel very rested and relaxed, and if we don't have deep sleep for some time, then we feel totally out of sorts. But what we experience during deep sleep is not anything specific. There's nothing, we don't remember anything. In other words, it is a state in which that which is at the surface of experience, the everyday reality, is not present at all. And what we experience in dreams also is not present. In dreams, you could say, well, there's a certain reality there, but it's only the memory, it's only in the mind that all these things happen, and so we experience dreams. But what happens in deep sleep, we cannot say at all. We have no clue to it, except we know it's an extremely desirable state, because we find ourselves very unhappy if we are not able to achieve it. So the message that, the implication that we draw from this is that what gives us the greatest satisfaction is not what we experience during the day. And it's not what we recall when we dream at night. What gives us the greatest satisfaction in the ordinary run of things is something which seems to be at the heart of what we experience, but is not the experience itself. That gives us a clue. That gives us a clue that the experiences that we have actually, they distort something, they hide something that is more fundamental, and that is at the heart of the experience. So what is it that is at the heart of our experience? That is the divine reality. That is, in other words, it is not, normally we want this and we don't want that. So we have desires and we have aversions. But beyond all desires and aversions, there's a reality which does not desire and is not averse. It is a pure experience. And that pure experience is characterized by great joy, which we remember when we wake up. Oh, I slept well, I knew nothing. But it was extremely joyous and extremely essential state. So from that, we consider that to be supportive of this idea that God alone really is what is at the heart of every experience. And if we, even on the level of science, if we go to those, to that level of thought, there is something that is at the heart of every experience. There is below, underneath the changes on the surface, there is a screen on which these changes are perceived. If the screen were not there, you would not perceive any of them. This is the analogy that is drawn. It's just like a motion picture. If you have if you project a motion picture, you need a screen in order to see it. If you remove the screen, you don't see anything. Then, of course, you could say, well, there are three-dimensional images that can appear in space and so forth. But that's carrying the analogy. This is only an analogy. We're just trying to explain by analogy what this reality is. And the analogy of the screen is a very good one, that without the presence of the screen, we would not see anything. You could project whatever beautiful motion picture you want. If the screen isn't there, nothing is seen. On the other hand, when you look at the screen, what is it that you see? You don't see anything very definite either. I mean, you see things, various things happening, people doing this and that. You see a boat about to go over Niagara Falls, and you sit there in a movie theater and you think it's real, and you are terribly upset. Oh, this boat is going over Niagara Falls, and suddenly you realize, no, you're sitting in the theater. This is a photograph. This is not anything that's actually happening. But without the presence of the screen, you would not see anything. So this is the analogy that is drawn, that without the presence of God, this universe would not be experienced at all. At the heart of every experience is that reality, is that screen on which we actually perceive the experience. So what we experience all the time is just the experience of God, really speaking. And on top of that, overlaying that are all the details of our life. So this is the method of meditation, which is now, so popular. People have different forms of meditation, different spiritual traditions bring on different forms of prayer or meditation. And the purpose of that is to stop what is perceived obviously on the surface and to try to experience that upon which the projection is projected. So that is the principle, that there is something here. I mean, this is not a question of theory. This is why it should be so, or what is the proof of it. The thing is, this is what has been declared by the people who experience it, and they've thrown a challenge to us that we also can experience it if we follow their instructions. So every religion is a way of trying to approach this, is a way of trying to make that experience, that intuitive reality, make it actually perceptible in a very concrete way. So in that sense also, it is the experience of Easter originally was done in such a way, Christ predicted that it would happen during his life, and it was that the reality that Christ had conquered life, in the sense that he had conquered life, he had conquered death, he had reached that communion with God, that communion with the Father. He had realized the presence of the unchanging. He had realized the source from which all this perceived, the energy from which all of this comes. And the demonstration of it was the crucifixion and the resurrection. It was done in a physical way because we're basically physical beings, and we trust what we see on the physical level far too much. But nevertheless, we trust that as being the standard of reality. And so, therefore, if it had to be demonstrated that there was more than that this was only the superficial view of existence, that there were other dimensions. If it had to be done in a very physical way, Christ, by his sacrifice, did that. And but this is a truth that is expressed in the scriptures of all religions, that this is the reality, that really speaking, spiritual renewal is the message of Easter. That is the title of this talk. And what is that spiritual renewal? It is the understanding, it is an attempt to experience this, that I am not the body. This body that I perceive, which I use to do various things, achieve various ends, that is an instrument that I'm using. And because I don't understand anything else, I think this is the only reality I experience. I give it too much importance. But nevertheless, it is not the only reality. So I am not this body. I am not this mind. Also, I give it too much importance to this mind. I think this is everything that I have to do. I need this mind, and I cultivate it very carefully. I train it, and I use it in all sorts of ways. And at this level, this is excellent. There's no problem with that. But the point is, it isn't a totally satisfactory level, because the body passes away, and the mind, we have no idea what happens to the mind. On the surface, we think the mind passes away when the body passes away. But there's no justification in that, because over history, people have experienced that even after the body dies, the mind does not necessarily die. You could see that there is something called a near-death experience, in which a person has, for some medical reason, actually passed away. That is, the body no longer shows life. Medically, it has been declared to be dead. Tested in various ways, there's no sign of life. And yet, after some period of time, that life returns. That person again revives. And these are called near-death experiences. And studies have been carried out on them. And they have found that even after the body has been declared medically dead, experiences continue. And there was a lady named Moody, a doctor, who did studies on that, and several other people have done it, that sort of thing. They have come up with, there's certain things that they were wondering, all those people who claimed that they had been declared to be clinically dead, is there any coherence in the messages that they remember, in whatever they remember? And they do find certain categories of experience that are generally reported by those people. And but later on, for some reason, the body is able to again come to life, or manifest signs of life, and then gradually it again becomes living, and they remember those things. And there was coherence in the memories of all these people who were not at all related to each other. So the fact that the mind dies when the body dies is not a justifiable assumption at all. In fact, there's distinct evidence to the contrary. So, and that which I call I am not the body, but it is not the mind either, because the mind in the state of deep sleep, which is one of my beloved states of every day, because it is the state of, that people generally, as I was saying, people feel very distressed if they don't attain that state of deep sleep. But in that state of deep sleep, the mind is not present at all, either. Or at least you could say the perceptible parts, the knowable parts, the rememberable parts of the mind are not there. So, in other words, the basic message, what we're talking about, is the message of Easter, the spiritual renewal. And that spiritual renewal is a universal phenomenon. It is not something that is restricted to one religion, say Christianity. It is, a magnificent part of the Easter remembrance, but it is not confined to Christianity. This idea is that the basic principle is that the body is not necessary it is extremely instrumental, but is it not an essential component? The mind is not an essential component because the idea of reincarnation has been also quite extensively studied, and there are lots of proofs of that. Children remembering something that they could never possibly have known, and then telling their parents, I was born in such and such a village somewhere. And so the parents look around for signs of that sort. They find a village, they take the child there. The child tells them exactly, this is where this is, even though it had no way of knowing it. Various things have been done to show that indeed, I am not the body, I am not the mind. The body I use, and then the body decays and the body is buried. And the mind I use, but after some time, the mind also is given up. There is something within me which is neither the body nor the mind, but which is at the very heart of my self-consciousness. That is the Atman or the spirit or the inner self, whatever name you want to give it. Actually, it is God present within us. That is how it can also be viewed. The reality of God, which every religion proclaims, and every religion makes certain definite statements about, but that reality of God is also within us. This is the basic understanding of religion, that the reality of God is within each one of us. So when the body goes and when the mind goes, there is a reality which remains, which again appears when body and mind appear. Whenever life appears, that reality also is manifested. It is the only reality. It is the reality at the heart of everything. That reality is in my heart also. And it's in the heart of everything, everywhere. So the message of Easter should be something of that sort. That, yes, Christ was resurrected and Christianity was really created as a result of the resurrection of Easter. That was the real message that of spiritual renewal, that it is in God. In God we move, in God we live, in God we move, in God we have our being. Normally we don't see that because we're focused on the material aspect of things. We're focused on the material reality. We're not focused on the spiritual. We're so concerned, naturally so, because the physical reality has certain physical consequences that naturally we have to deal with. But the message of Easter is that it is not enough, that the things that appear on the surface are indications of a deeper reality, a deeper understanding, that there is a reality within us that has never come into existence and will never disappear. And that the more we actually are able to experience this, the more we're able to focus on what is within, the closer we are to understanding the real nature of reality. And this is the purpose of life. Easter is what reminds us of that what we should pay attention to. The message is that the body of Christ was not the heart of the matter. See, I am not this body, and Christ proved by his resurrection that he is not the body, and if he is not the body, neither are we, in essence, the body. The body is an instrument that we use, just like clothing that we have put on. In fact, that analogy is addressed in the Bhagavad Gita. Vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani granati nadoruparani. Like that, as a person takes on, discards clothing that is old and assumes new clothing, in that same sense, this great soul, this individual reality, which is a part of the total reality of the universe, which is, in that same sense, it sheds one body because it is old and worn, and takes on another that is new. So, in other words, that spiritual renewal is something which should happen in all of our lives, which should be central to all of our thoughts, that we want to be devoted to the reality that is at the heart of everything, that which has never been created, and which, because it was never created, it can never be destroyed. That is the reality of God. That is the infinite and the eternal. And even in a very scientific way, if one examines all of the experience that human beings have and all of the different states of nature, we find that all of this is still taking place against a background, that there's an unchanging background to everything that changes. That's a very significant scientific reality. There is an unchanging background to everything that changes, to everything that we perceive. That unchanging background cannot be denied, because the location, the events of our lives could never be determined, could never be described if there were not some basic form of description that was understandable by all of us. Otherwise we could never communicate about anything. So at the heart of everything, at the deepest core of every experience and every phenomenon, there must be a reality that everything must take place against that unchanging background. And that unchanging background is what the great souls who have actually experienced it, they tell us it is Sat Chit Ananda. That means it is existence itself. It is consciousness itself. It's not an inert, unsensible thing. It is consciousness itself. And it is bliss itself. It is that which we mean by bliss. Bliss is that infinite satisfaction, that infinite fulfillment that is incapable of change. That infinite fulfillment is at the very heart of our own being. All within us and all outside of us that changes is seen against the background reality, which itself is the totality and can never change. This is the reality which we call God, the infinite, the eternal. From that all our blessings come, from that all our hopes exist. So now we can, if anyone has anything to say about this, unless I've thoroughly, caused everyone to remain in utter silence, I hope you will have some comments to make, and we can talk about that for the next few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji. I have a question. In the unchanging background, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
In the unchanging background, is there the possibility of renewal moment by moment?
That renewal is not moment by moment. That renewal is constant and eternal. In other words, if you shorten each moment, or if you lengthen each moment indefinitely, in other words, that renewal is a return to the original perfection. But that renewal can only happen to that which is on the surface of things. In other words, our life, if our life is not as we would like it to be, we can have renewal, spiritual renewal. We can bring it back to the original spiritual perfection, to the original spiritual condition. But if there can be, but in the reality that's at the basis of everything, in the reality that's present in our hearts, there is no change. There's never any change. There cannot be any change, because it is the background of everything that changes. I mean, even in a very scientific way, everything that changes, it changes in relation to something which changes less. So unless there is ultimately something which doesn't change at all, we're not really able to categorize any changes. So the existence of God, the infinite, the eternal, the pure perfection, is that which never changes. And so different religions put a different focus on it, put a different view, or show us different aspects of that reality, in the sense that they are viewing it from different angles, but the basis of what they're viewing is one and unchangeable, because it is the metric of everything that changes. There must be such a thing. In other words, everything, Swami Vivekananda made that point, that everything that changes is only measured with reference to something that changes less. So ultimately, there must be something which doesn't change at all. Otherwise, we simply will have change upon change upon change. There will be no end to it. But this is what the great souls who have experienced all this, they tell us there is an end to it. There is a goal. And that goal is unchanging and is full perfection and has nothing to do with the body, has nothing to do with the mind. It is perfection itself. So that is the message of all religions, and especially it is the message of Easter, because Christ comes from that, or enters into that, or, gives us that, the message he has experienced that, and he wants to, notify that, or to announce that this is what has happened. Vedahametam purusham mahantam. This is one of the Upanishads, the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Vedahametam purusham mahantam. I have known this infinite, glorious being. Aditya Varnam Tamasah Parastat, he's of the nature of the sun. He's all brilliance, all light, beyond all darkness. Tameva viditva timrityumeti. Those who know that reality, they go beyond death or beyond any change. Anyah pantha vidyate yanaya. There is There is no other way to attain that infinite perfection except by realizing that which is infinitely perfect. And there is such a reality, and all religions in every way try to, in different ways, try to show us the path to that.
Thank you, Swamiji.
So, Swamiji?
Yes,
can you
yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
so,
yes.
So then the sense of renewal, constant renewal, is actually the same as stillness, which is actually the same as change in changelessness. So it's like the closer you get to God, these words sort of merge into one truth without opposing one another, without any sense of dichotomy, because the closer one gets to the changeless, everything is true within it. Is that correct?
The closer one gets to the changeless means we are totally enveloped and absorbed in that changelessness. I mean, that change could not be, that is the ultimate statement that is made, and that is the challenge that is thrown out to science and psychology and everything else, that change could not ultimately be determined unless there were changelessness at the heart of everything that appears to change. And so that changelessness is, on the surface of things you say, well, what is the advantage of changelessness? But the changelessness is also the changelessness of the deep sleep state we were talking about. The reason we're so happy with deep sleep, which we try to get into every day, as we were talking earlier, is because it does seem to be a change of, a state of changelessness. It is a state in which everything that changes, there is nothing that changes, So this is why it gets close to what we inherently internally understand. Without being able to verbalize it necessarily, but internally we understand that the bliss, that infinite Satchidananda, is describing this state of changelessness, which is not the prelude to something else, but is the background of everything that changes. So this is these are the profound implications of all of these different ideas.
Thank you.
Pranam, Swamiji. I don't know if, can I interrupt?
Oh, yes, of course.
Another question?
Yes.
As a person who did recently have an experience in a hospital setting of seeing lights and feeling near death and feeling an overwhelming sense of calmness and peacefulness during that time and during those experiences, which I can describe and see very vividly still. I was wondering if Brahman and the Atman are all one entity and that we're part of this multifaceted universe. I was just wondering, how is the soul separate from Brahman and becoming part of the ultimate reality is obviously the goal in moksha, or what's interpreted to me to be moksha or the afterlife, or the answer to the cosmological argument. I don't know if I delineated my question properly.
Well, the thing is that there are statements in the Upanishads that relate to that very idea. I mean, which sounds almost impossible if we look at it from the ordinary standpoint. That is the standpoint of ordinary philosophy. But from the standpoint of experience, it's a different thing. Aham Brahmasmi is one of the statements. And in fact, the four basic statements in the Hindu tradition that are considered the very core of spiritual teachings are of this nature. Aham Brahmasmi, I am that reality, that Brahman. Sarvam Khalidam Brahma, that is another, in a similar sense, from the Chandogya Upanishad. All of this indeed is Brahman. That means at the heart of every experience there is that reality of the totality, of the infinity, of the utter perfection. So it is not at all far-fetched to draw that conclusion when we are thinking intellectually about it. I am that reality. Aham Brahmasmi is one of these four statements. I am Atma Brahma. This Atman, this inner reality, this inner truth is that same divine reality. Tattvamasi, that you are, all of that I see, everything that I see around is that reality. That is the major truth that is inculcated by the Upanishads and therefore by the Hindu tradition. So this is not at all something that is far-fetched in that sense. The difficulty is to correlate that with the experience of everyday life, where things seem totally different. I don't see myself as being the same as that infinite reality. I don't see that unlimitedness. So that is the renewal, the spiritual renewal that Easter is supposed to remind us of, that this is the direction in which we should travel, and we should try to find that which is unchangeable within everything that changes. And so each religion gives us a method of doing that. Prayer is one method. Self-surrender is another method. That I'm surrendering to that reality. Now, you don't know exactly what that reality is, but the yearning itself, Sri Ramakrishna, one of our inspiration here in the Vedanta movement, started by him and by Swami Vedananda, is that the feeling that that reality should be seen as present everywhere. And so many disciplines are there. I surrender to that. In other words, that is my reality. That is the essence. That is what I want to concentrate on. I surrender to the teacher who, Sri Ramakrishna, who brought all this. By doing all of these things, these are all things we do in this changing panorama of the world, in order to experience that which is at the heart of everything, which never changes. So each religion has its own way of doing that. And in the Christian religion, this Easter occasion is one of the great reminders of that fact. But it's interpreted in different ways by different people. That is natural. But the whole messages, this is what we should concentrate on. Should concentrate on trying to realize the spiritual nature of everything, that which is at the heart of everything. That is our message. That is what we should try to. That is what we should try to become. That is what we should try to do. Okay, so we have reached the end of the time allotted. So a prayer before the end. Om Dhyau Shanti Antariksham Shanti Prithivi Shanti Apo Shanti Roshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishve Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Sama Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, peace is in heaven, peace is in the sky, on the earth and in the waters. The herbs, the plants and the trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. Everything in the universe is pervaded by peace. May that infinite universal peace enter our soul and being. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.
Thank you so much.